Evening. In case you haven't been paying attention, e-commerce has exploded in India. In less than 5 years, hundreds of brands have appeared on the scene, collectively raising over $15 billion. So the question is, why now? Underlying the underlying wave over here are three things. One, cheap smartphones, less than $50 Chinese smartphones. Cheap data, about $2 a month for 1 GB data a day and unlimited phone calls. Beat that. And increasing proliferation of digital payments. To put it in context, we're talking about Indians going from having less than a couple of million credit cards and debit cards to almost a billion debit cards in circulation. In terms of broadband, we're looking at a few millions to 500 million Indians now connected in terms of broadband. And that brings into the question, where is travel? In terms of online, travel is one of the most prominent categories. Last year, 3 out of 4 Indians brought at least something related to travel online, far ahead of media streaming, which is mostly working on a freemium and ad-based model in India, grocery, dining, retail shopping, just a little ahead. And looking at a holistic picture, the Indian travel market, almost $32 billion, just 40% of it is online. And I say it just because it's primarily rail and air travel that's fueling. A whole lot of segments are yet to come online, which is why online is going to grow faster than the total market. And come 2022, almost 50% of travel in India will be booked online. And where is that going to be booked? Primarily on mobile. It's going to go from $1 and $4 that was booked online to almost $1 and $2 that would be booked online come 2022. To know more about this, let's get up our speakers. First up, our next speaker helped lead his company through a blockbuster IPO and multiple acquisitions, transforming from humble beginnings in a small office in South Delhi into a leading online travel company with 3,000 employees and 50 branches in India and abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the co-founder and CEO India of MakeMyTrip, Rajesh Magow. Hey, Rajesh. And joining us is Dhruv Shringi. He hatched the idea to start an online travel company in India one night over a few drinks with friends in a London pub. It launched with a team of 3 in 2006, and he now heads up a NASDAQ-listed company with 2,400 employees. Please welcome co-founder and CEO of Yatra Online Limited, Dhruv Shringi. Hey, Dhruv. It's been a while.
Hi.
So, talking about the 10+ years that both of the brands have been in existence, and I had the slide showing both digital and broadband revolution of India. Talk about how it was back then, and going back to Maggie's presentation around power paradox, how things are changing with new competition, new environment in the Indian context.
Yeah, sure. Well, back then, over a decade ago, it started with dial-up connection. I don't know how many of you would have probably be able to relate with that unique tone of the dial-up connection that we had on the internet. And that was the time back then. And you saw some of those data points that in the presentation early on. Today, the scenario, I think we've come a long way. We've come a long way in terms of internet ecosystem powered by smartphone, which is India is the largest market, actually number one mobile market. And I don't know how many of you actually know, it's actually not China. China is not the number one. China is actually number 4 In terms of mobile penetration, India is about 80%. Indonesia is actually number 2, about 72, 73%, and China is actually 60%. And US, UK is into 30s. So I think mobile smartphone kind of changed the game in India, both from internet access device standpoint as well as bandwidth. And then we just were going only in one direction. I remember when we IPO'd in 2010, we had 120 million internet users, but broadband was only just about 1 or 2 percentage points. So it's nothing. And we were only able to, and we IPO'd in 2010. And that was like 10, 11 fiscal year. And that was all on the back of unidimensional flights product at that point in time. We couldn't kind of grow the hotel business at that point in time because you needed high quality bandwidth. And that improved the data plan that you spoke about in the preamble. It was quite cheap, and that kind of changed the game. Having said all of this, while we've come a long way, I do believe in India best is yet to come because the digital ecosystem involvement has just kind of started. Yeah. Credit card is one data point versus debit cards, which is like, as many people as they would have the saving account with them, they will have the debit card. Because ATM card is going to be the debit card. Yeah. And that's like phenomenal. And then there is also backbone infrastructure that is getting built as well, which is unified payment interface that's going to change the game next. So all in all, while we've come a long way in terms of just overall internet ecosystem involvement, I think best is yet to come.
Dhruv, how has the competitive landscape changed? Because back in the day, if you talked about online travel, it was IRCTC, couple of LCCs, and a string of OTAs. Now, when you think of online in itself, there are much bigger players, payment players, e-tail players, and they're just swelling up. What's the implication of that on travel as well?
Sure. I think one of the big changes which has happened over the course of the last few years is that you've got a lot of high-frequency use cases coming up on the internet. Right? Earlier, there was a scenario that you had few services which were available on the net. Travel was one of the key ones. It dominated for the longest period of time the online ecosystem in India. Right? 70% of e-commerce in India used to be travel. But today, you are seeing a scenario where you've got a lot of high-frequency use cases coming up. And the challenge for players in the travel category and other categories which are low frequency is that you will end up competing with people who are in the high-frequency use cases. In India, given that it's moving towards a mobile market, mobile is a scarce resource. So the home screen on the mobile is your scarcest resource from a consumer's point of view. And as a company, you want to get there. But consumers will retain only those on the home screen which have high-frequency consumption. Right? So that's one of the challenges that we as travel companies will need to now think about, that how do you compete with people for that scarce landscape versus those who've got high-frequency cases.
Air still is a huge chunk of online travel business in general. And both of your brands are diversifying. Hotels, you guys have moved much more than a needle on that front. Talk about that landscape, right? Highly fragmented, unlike the US, which is more chain-based. What does it take to convince the consumer to book a hotel online wherein they're going to a mom-and-pop hotel?
Sure. I think content plays a very important role, and also the organization as a brand. So we as brands need to give the customer a certain amount of trust to be able to book that product. Now, the trust can come in many forms, either by underwriting. In some cases, you're providing price subsidies, right? All of that is happening to give the consumer the trust and get him to experience the product. So we are in that very early stages of evolution where it's going through a trial, inducing trial. Once you induce trial, then you'll get into the retention and the repeat buying, right? But you're still at that relatively early stage in the ecosystem where consumers are coming in just testing the waters. The fact that bandwidth has changed, right, and you've got a lot of broadband coming through right now, has made a sea change on that. Because ultimately, images, reviews, feedback, maps, all of those become important ingredients in a customer booking a hotel product. So unlike a flight, which is a very standardized commodity, as a consumer, I know exactly what I'll get, right, when I'm booking the flight. Here, it's a much more differentiated product, and it's coming up on the back of what you just, the comment you just made. 90% of the supply is fragmented mom-and-pop supply. So it becomes even more important. And in addition to what's happening on the technology front, I think there are efforts being made by all of us in terms of standardizing the supply. Whether you call it a smart hotel, someone calls it something else, everyone's trying to do their bit in terms of bringing a certain degree of standardization to make it easier for the customer to book online.
No, good that you brought that up, because at some point in not so distant past, when Oyo came up aggressively, both of your brands also dabbled in that space of kind of getting those hotels directly contracted and a similar Oyo-like structure, but then you transition from that into almost like putting a label saying this is a MakeMyTrip certified hotel, this is a Yatra certified hotel. So talk about that evolution in your own brands and as part of the customer proposition. How does that work?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we need to understand what the underneath problem was, right? I guess the underneath problem was, as Dhruv was alluding to, was in the budget space, in a highly fragmented supply landscape, the customer experience is not standardized, right? So that was the core problem that all of us in different variants that we were trying to solve for. At least from our point of view, we never thought that we were going to go on the supply side and start to manage the hotel, because it didn't really make sense to us, just from a core strength of the platform of the company that we had. And therefore, what was the next best alternative? And we were trying to say that, in the budget segment, consumer actually trust our brand, and why don't we actually take that position, go all out and absolutely shout about it, and also give guarantees in terms of, if you don't get the experience, what we promise, we'll give you money back guarantee, et cetera, et cetera. But, just take that pedestal position and say, and leverage our own brand, which is established in consumers' mind already. Given that they were trusting, right? So MakeMyTrip is a well-trusted brand today. Goibibo is a well-trusted brand today. And therefore, we went with that kind of a logic, and we said, okay, we will call it as Go Stays or, MMT Assured for that matter. But, essentially what we were trying to do was to promise certain standardized experience, like 5 or 6 basic stuff, like, Wi-Fi and breakfast and air conditioning working, and, you are going to have cleanliness and so on and so forth. And make sure that you have actually audit process, teams, et cetera, in place to provide that consistency in that experience. And then you kind of take that position, right? And I guess Oyo was trying to do it in the format that they were trying to do, which is like, go even more deeper and maybe try to upgrade the hotel, et cetera, as well. And I'm sure, Dhruv was trying to do in Yatra the same thing. But the problem that we were solving was the real problem that existed. And I think it helped. I mean, today we have about 11,000 Go Stays properties, for example, and we sell whole lot of them. And you would be surprised, despite actually having gone out and saying, we will give money back guarantee and all of that, very, very small number of complaints or the claims that you would get. And partly because maybe, people just don't care beyond a point. But large part of it is also, at least that is kind of validated from the audit processes, that we are able to provide that kind of consistent experience. So that's how it is evolved. And going forward, I think that problem might get extended to even alternative accommodations. So, this is the, at least we were talking about named hotels in the organized and maybe unorganized as well, but they were named hotels. But now you would go to alternative accommodation space, which is a great opportunity in India as well. You would encounter different problems. Obviously, the stay experience is not going to be standardized because the properties per se are very different. And therefore, you will have to solve a different problem for service apartment, different problem for, let's say, homestay, and so on. So I guess as long as we stay focused on solving the customer pain area, we would keep winning the game.
Can a Yatra Smart Choice hotel also be a Go Stay hotel, or is it like if you're one label, you stick to one label? What's the mechanism there?
Sure.
Because there was a time wherein hotels were just flipping over one brand over the other.
I think hotels are also learning through this process, right? I think India is a great market to that extent where literally all balls are up in the air at the same time, right? So it's an evolution cycle that we are going through. The approach we took was that we didn't want to be in a scenario where our hotel partners view us as competing with them as well, right? So we thought of ourselves and we continue to think of ourselves more as a technology platform. So we want to be the intermediate layer. We want to provide the technology assistance and the distribution. But we don't want to get on to competing head-on with the other hotel partners, right? Because there'll always be that inherent risk that hotels will feel that if you've got your own branded product, then what happens to my inventory? Yeah. Instead, we then, given that we had a focus on corporate customers as well, decided to look at certain properties which fit the profile from a corporate traveler's point of view and started looking and working closely with them in terms of the hotel themselves upgrading the quality of service. Okay. So that's how we went about it, right? We wanted to retain our independence as a platform and work with the partners. We prescribed certain criteria to them that if you want to be part of this plan, then these are the few things that you need to do to be able to deliver onto that commitment. And if you're delivering onto that service quality, we can then put you in front of our corporate customers as well. So that's the way we've tried to strike that balance.
Both the brands rolled out their corporate solutions over the course of last year or so. Why now? And do you think the Indian corporate traveler is ready to use a more organized tool and solution?
You know, the interesting fact is that a lot of the corporates who behave like retail actually are already retail channel customers. And that's like small enterprises, medium enterprises, and so on. I think we often confuse the corporate market with an organized corporate market like big giants, where they will have to actually do a tender process to get the travel agent in. And we used to do that, you know, a few years ago, and we started not to pursue that because it wasn't really scalable and we were not leveraging technology there. I think where we got excited with corporate segment was, I think we were very clear that we want to leverage technology and not necessarily throw people to solve this problem. And therefore, you know, if you actually go through the My Business, you know, the solution that we are providing it to the customer, it's very retail looking, right? Just from a look and feel standpoint. Very simple, straightforward, self-service kind of a tool, which is given to the employees, and then, you know, all the onboarding process is very, very quick and all of that. And we don't typically have any implants sitting in the corporate. And interestingly, it's actually already gaining a good traction. We have about 2,500 corporates that actually got acquired and rolled, not by the sales force, but, you know, through the platform traffic, which is encouraging. And that's what we want to do. And, you know, we wanted to make sure, you know, that there's no cannibalization happening here, because at the end of the day, that channel is available for you know, some of the corporate customers if they want to come in as an individual or retailer as well. And we were very pleased to know that that wasn't the case. And wherever that was the case, we kind of plugged those gaps in the product solution, and we didn't want to do that. So idea was to build incremental business. And I think you know, the feedback that we are getting from corporates is very encouraging. You know, so the NPS, which is the Net Promoter Score from the corporates, is as high as 90% on that product, which means that they're kind of loving it, because I think there's a problem to solve for, because there's lack of transparency when you know, you have implants there, you know, and then the whole billing process, the analysis part of it, you know, not necessarily very transparent. And therefore, everybody is kind of loving it. And besides the convenience that you give it to every booker of the corporate as well. Yeah. And mobile also actually helps you do that. You know, the whole approval process and all that, you're sitting in a meeting, it's just a, you know, quick push notification will come to you and you can just quickly do it sitting in the meeting. You don't have to just go back to desktop and do it. So I think technology is really helping getting into this segment, and we want to grow that.
See, our take has been slightly different. I think we've been at a different end of the spectrum in terms of the corporate business. It's something we started about 4 years ago, so it's not a recent phenomena, right? Today, we are the largest platform for corporate travelers in India. Some of the largest companies in India will use our platform, right? So be it any of the big four accounting firms, be it India's largest telecom operator, some of the largest banks in India, they're all on that platform. And what we've seen from an evolution point of view is that today almost half the transactions happen on the self-book platform. There is a big change in the consumer mindset. See, historically, organizations have relied on their travel departments or their travel desks. Today, no employee wants to wait for 4 hours to get a response from someone. So they want to move into a self-book environment. And we've tried to create a platform on which they can do everything from policy compliance to approval process mechanism to hotels to insurance, visa, forex, and now even expense management. Right? So it's a complete platform which is being built. We've taken a more top-down approach. We've gone after the larger corporations. Right? So our largest customer would be someone who spends over $100 million a year on travel. Right? And it'll be focused around these large organizations. The SME market, as Rajesh pointed out, is another great opportunity. I think these guys have already been online, and by providing them now a much more customized interface, you're locking them in for a longer duration, right? But they're two slightly different segments. The needs of each one of them are different, right? The large corporate does need a certain amount of handholding as well, because in addition to just the self-book part of it, their needs would vary. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum are the SME customers who are on a much more lighter touch model. But both of them, I think, to your point earlier, that is one of the areas where we've seen the most amount of change. When we started looking at this sector 4 years back, everyone told us that no corporation will adopt self-book technology. I mean, recently, one of the largest, Airtel, which is one of the largest telecom operators in India, right, employing 30,000 people, implemented that across the board. That's the kind of change which is happening in the consumer behavior because the average employee age in India is 29 years. Yeah. These guys are digital natives. They don't carry the legacy that most of us carry, right? So for them, that's the only way they know of doing things.
Yep.
So taking a cue from mobile, and throughout the last 2 days, we've been also listening about the implication of voice in travel. How far of that is a reality in India, if it is at all? I know MakeMyTrip's been piloting a few things for a while, but what's the real world scenario out there?
I think it's actually, probably going to be the future. Definitely. Now, in terms of what kind of use cases and how do you actually crack that, actual interface, whether it's going to be taking voice input or output together, or it's going to be input supported by chat, or it's going to be any different form of hybrid is the kind of experimentation that we are doing. And I think we will be able to get to a position which works really well just from a proof of concept standpoint. And especially in India, I think one of the very important use cases, I think we should probably, if the benefit of everyone here, we should know that we've got like multi-lingual states. We have like many languages, regional languages. Although India, a lot of the English-speaking people. And English-speaking people are already on internet. And now the next problem that we need to solve for is how do we bring the next 250 million or next 500 million onto not only doing the social activities on the internet, but also doing the e-commerce. So from that perspective, when you go out, I think it becomes very important because the text form of regional language, be it native language in India, Hindi or Gujarati or Marathi or any other South Indian language, it's just not easy. It's just not available, right? So what is the next form that and they're all there on the internet, but doing social chatting with the symbol languages most of the time, or using Hinglish, which is a combination of Hindi, English, and so on and so forth. So I think in that scenario, it becomes very important. I think voice is going to play a very big role. I heard some of the other speakers saying that, some of the use cases might not be great for e-commerce and voice. But I think if you try and crack it with a combination of the assist model or chat, I think it could work beautifully. So we do believe voice is going to be a very important, very critical part to play when you think about bringing in next 250 million internet users on the platform.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Rajesh Magow and Dhruv Shringi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.